Sometimes fandoms will hype up a moment they've absolutely convinced themselves will happen, only to be left crestfallen when the show wraps up without it ever actually taking place. Maybe fans got a little too overzealous and hype invested in an idea that the creative team had long since moved away from. And so, inspired by a recent Reddit thread on the very subject, I'm Ellie for What Culture, here with 10 hugely hyped TV moments that never ended up happening. Number 10. Bruce Willis's cameo, Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Even the most casual Brooklyn Nine-Nine viewer will know that protagonist Jake is the world's biggest fan of the Die Hard franchise. Enough that he even ended up naming his son McClane in honor of the series' protagonist John McClane, played of course by Bruce Willis. Now for years, fans campaigned for Willis to have a cameo on the show, which would then see him cross paths with Jake. And given Willis's willingness to send up his most iconic character, even playing a Lego version of him in the Lego Movie 2, the second part, it seems like it might actually happen. Now, although creator Dan Gore did indeed attempt to get Willis on the show, it sadly never came to pass by the time Brooklyn wrapped up its 8-season run in 2021, and this could possibly be due to Willis's declining health in more recent years. All the same, once the show concluded, Gore revealed a favoured idea for Willis's cameo, for the A-lister to make a visit to the precinct while the entire 9-9 is out on a case, meaning that Jake hilariously actually misses out on meeting his hero. Number 9. Lady Stonehart, Game of Thrones. Following the death of Catelyn Stark as part of Game of Thrones' unforgettable Red Wedding in Season 3, book readers naturally expected that, as in the novels, she would then return as Lady Stoneheart, a resurrected, empathy-devoid version of Catelyn hell-bent on killing those responsible for the Red Wedding. In 2020, the year after the series concluded, the creators confirmed that they never had much intent on actually including Lady Stoneheart, and though her resurrection is an undeniable fan favourite moment from the books, they had several reasons for excluding her entirely. Firstly, they cited a conflict with story elements from George R.R. Martin's 2 remaining unreleased novels in the book series, while also feeling that resurrecting Catelyn would have diminished the impact of Jon Snow's later revival, and also that it might undermine the horror of the Red Wedding itself. Honestly, as incredible as it would have been to see the undead Lady Stoneheart realised in live action, these reasons against it actually do make a decent amount of sense. Number 8. Chris and Paulie find the Russian, The Sopranos. Beyond the mystery of Tony Soprano's fate in The Sopranos' final episode, the series' most agonising mystery must surely be the fate of Valerie, the Russian commando who flees from Chris and Paulie in the episode Pine Barrens, never to be seen again. Fans spent the following years speculating on Valerie's whereabouts, and given that the episode ended with Tony telling Paulie he'll have to deal with Valerie if he ever resurfaces, it seemed like a seed that had been sown for him to return in the future. But in the show's subsequent 3 seasons, Valerie was never seen again, with creator David Chase opting instead to leave audiences theorising about his fate forevermore, much like Tony's. It was later revealed, however, that Chase did actually write a 6th season scene in which Chris and Paulie see Valerie outside a bar purely by chance, and promptly shoot him to death. But ultimately that idea was scrapped. Number 7. Sam finally returns home, Quantum Leap. If there's one single solitary moment that all Quantum Leap fans expected to see by the show's last episode, it was surely protagonist Sam Beckett finally returning home once and for all. But creator Donald P. Bellisario hedged his bets that the show would get renewed for a 6th season, ignoring network advice that implored him to end Season 5 in a manner which would also function as a series finale if necessary. And so when the show wasn't picked up for Season 6, Bellisario was left in something of a bind. Without any footage of Sam returning home, the show simply ended with the almost hilariously bleak title card, Dr. Sam Beckett Never Returned Home, made even worse by the fact that Sam's surname isn't even spelt right. Fans were naturally outraged that Sam's fate, the entire premise of the show even, was never resolved, and more than 30 years since the finale aired, it remains infuriatingly up in the air. And furthermore, given that Scott Bakula has thus far declined to appear in the current Quantum Leap reboot, it seems unlikely that we're ever going to see that one triumphant moment every single fan of the series so desperately wanted to see. Number 6. Donald Sutherland as Jack Bauer's dad, 24. Ever since the early days of 24, fans dreamed of the day that the series would introduce Jack Bauer's father, because of course the show would have to cast his real-life father, acting legend Donald Sutherland, right? And so when the 6th season was set to feature Jack's pa, Philip Bauer, in a major role, fans were thrilled, only to learn that the production cast James Cromwell instead. Now, just to be clear, Cromwell is a wonderful actor, and he did a solid job in the role of season 6's surprise villain. But it goes without saying that Sutherland would have been far more persuasive as Jack's father. And as for why Sutherland Sr. didn't play the part, well, he reportedly wasn't keen on playing someone who wants to kill his son, preferring to seek out a less antagonistic team-up with his progeny. All the same, for all of season 6's many misgivings, it would have been pure dramatic dynamite to see actual father and son on screen together. Talk about a missed opportunity. Number 5. Peter rescues Caitlyn Heroes. Oh, Heroes. Has there ever been a TV show more blatantly ruined by behind-the-scenes nonsense than this one? In its 2nd season, protagonist Peter and girlfriend Caitlyn visit the post-apocalyptic New York City of the future. And when Peter goes back to the present, Caitlyn is accidentally left in this grim timeline. Oh, and with Peter's time-traveling powers inaccessible, he can't go back and get her. This dangling thread was obviously expected to be picked up again later in season 2, but due to the 2007 to 2008 WGA writers' strike heavily impacting shooting, the 2nd season ended up being significantly shortened. And so, Peter never ended up rescuing Caitlyn. But because Peter does prevent the future apocalypse, we're then left to assume that poor Caitlyn just got straight up wiped from existence, given that the future that she existed in ultimately never ended up happening. The fact that Peter doesn't even reference this tragedy makes it that much worse, the show evidently deciding to just move on from Caitlyn and hope that fans didn't remember. But of course, they did. Number 4. Charlie Sheen returns 2.5 Men. There was much scuttlebutt about how 2.5 Men would wrap up, with most speculation centered around the possible involvement of Charlie Sheen, who was fired from the hit sitcom after its 8th season due to making disparaging remarks about the series' creator. Fans figured that the pair might have mended things enough for him to return for the series finale at the end of season 12, but that evidently did not happen. Instead, the show's final ever scene saw a stand-in play Charlie from behind as he returns home and is crushed to death by a piano. And a tag in the end credits then reveals that the original plan was to have Sheen return, make a speech about drug abuse, and then deem himself exempt due to being invincible before being crushed by the aforementioned piano. But because Sheen didn't like the idea, favouring instead a setup for a sequel series called The Harpers, he declined to appear, and so the show was robbed of one final appearance from its original star. Number 3. Maris finally shows her face, Frasier. One of the all-time best sitcom gags is the never-present nature of Niles Crane's once-wife Maris, who despite being mentioned time and time again throughout the series, is never clearly shown on screen even once. Countless references have been made to Maris's rail-thin, pale physical appearance, but she's only ever been seen in shadow and in bandages. Never have we had a clear look at her face or her body. Fans were desperate to see what she actually looked like, and whether Niles and co were simply exaggerating her appearance. But by the time Frasier went off the air, she was still never seen unobscured. Curiously, she was originally going to be revealed to the audience after just a few episodes. Yet once the jokes about her physical appearance and eccentric mental state began piling up, the creators actually decided that she had become uncastable, and so they opted to leave her off screen. It does make sense, but at the same time, fans were dying to see what Maris actually looked like. Given that she's now stranded on a private island while wanted for murder, I would say that it's pretty unlikely that she would ever show up in the current Frasier revival. Number 2. Toby is the Scranton Strangler, The Office. The 6th season of The Office US introduced a subplot where a serial killer, the Scranton Strangler, is terrorizing the town, and it wasn't long before fans began to float the theory that the killer was none other than Dunder Mifflin's sad sack HR rep, Toby Flenderson. A ton of circumstantial evidence throughout the show points to Toby possibly being the Strangler. And honestly, if it's going to be any member of the main cast, how could it not have been him? Though a man believed to be the Strangler is caught and put on trial later in the series, Toby himself, who serves on the trial's jury, notes his belief that the man is innocent, no matter that the Strangler eventually throttles him during a prison visit, seemingly confirming that he was the Strangler. That hardly put the theory to rest though, with many fans convinced that Toby was still the real Strangler Strangler hidden in plain sight. Hell, even NBC themselves eventually acknowledged the popularity of the theory by posting a Making a Murderer parody video on their official YouTube account, even if the show itself never pulled the trigger. On one hand, it would have been amazing to see this theory finally paid off, but on the other, it would have probably derailed the show's established tone. Besides, isn't it way more fun to consider the possibility that Toby is the Strangler and totally got away with it? Number 1. Dr. Cox meets Hugh Jackman, Scrubs. One of the most memorable recurring gags in Scrubs was Dr. Cox's inexplicable disdain for actor Hugh Jackman, something he hilariously noted on numerous occasions throughout the sitcom's run. It was widely speculated among Scrubs fandom at the time that the joke would culminate in Jackman making a cameo appearance of some kind, whether as a patient of Cox's or perhaps as a random masked-up doctor on Cox's team. But Scrubs sadly wrapped up its run without Jackman ever appearing on the show. Perhaps because creator Bill Lawrence waited until after it ended to confirm that the Jackman jokes were genuinely affectionate, rather than the result of a strange real-life beef. Given that Jackman has shown himself to be game for wild cameos, I mean, he was in movie 43 for God's sake, it really is a shame that this never came to pass.